Hey everyone, Annie's 20, and welcome to another new series, or a companion series, the Four Lands Report. So, when I started doing Bandori time, I thought, is there another piece of media, or at least something that I'm watching or doing that I would like to go into a little more in depth into, aside from just talking about all the seasons of Bang Dream and everything over and over again, which I could do for forever. And of course, what not better than my favorite book series of all time, the Shannara series by Terry Brooks. This thing's hefty. Like, honestly, this book has convinced me to never do this again. As neat as it is to have like a compilation, which is all like an entire trilogy in one thing. This thing is so big, it's so unwieldy. It's like never again. This is all the other books. I'm getting them individually. But regardless, as the title says, this one is on the first book of the trilogy, The Sword of Shannara. I do think it's funny. In the books like the old books that I read, the old versions. I don't remember if they were all hardcovers or soft covers, but it was a long time ago. When you open the page, on one of the inner pages, it would have like the entire series listed out and categorized by trilogy. I say trilogy even though like the first book stands by itself. The First King of Shannara is its own thing. It's a prequel to this trilogy. And then there's the Heritage of Shannara, which is 4 books long. And then there's the other trilogies listing it off. This one, whenever this was on that list, it would just say Shannara. And then it would list the Sword, Elfstones, and Wish Song. I don't know at what point it started being called the Sword of Shannara Trilogy. But I don't know, what else they would want to call it, given that I think the sword is only relevant in the first one. And it has nothing to do with the other 2. At least as far as I remember from my memories of reading the books. It's been a long time. This shit is so good. Like, I don't know how else to put it. So I guess we'll start just talking about the first book, the Sword of Shannara itself. And I will say one of my favorite things about books like this, which isn't exclusive to the Sword or to the Shannara trilogy or Shannara books, is this. Oh, I'm trying not to rip this. Like how it has the maps, like the drawn maps on the inside of the covers, just so you could follow along as to where the characters are. I know like the Warriors books, the Cats books also had those in here. Although it is funny because sometimes there's always that one book or that one storyline that takes place off the map. So it's like, well, what's the point now? I think the current one that I'm reading is like that. But anyway, it's been so long since I read Sword of Shannara the first time. I honestly don't remember how long it's been. I think I was in high school, which I graduated high school in 2010. So, yeah, sounds about right. So I was there starting, I think, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 9, 9, 10. Yeah, so 2006. So somewhere around there that I started reading these things. It's almost been 20 years, man. And I read them out of order because I read the ones that my sister had. And I think the first one I read was The Voyage of the Gerald Shannara Trilogy. That's Ilswitch, Antrax, and Morgour. And I was hooked from there. And then I went and read all the other ones. I don't remember if I read them all in order. I don't think I did. I think after that I just read all the ones that she had, which I know she had First King. I think she had Sword also. But after that, I think everything else I had to, I got from the library. And I read on my own time. And it's so funny, despite it being that long, I read all the books once. I've never reread any of them until now. And rereading Sword is fascinating to me because it's been so long since I read these, and yet the second a character says their name, I get thrown back 20 years in the past. I just remember who they are. The character that gave me the biggest, because I still vividly remember Alanon, the druid, the druid role, whoever the druids were, those are the characters that have stuck in my head the longest out of anyone. So Alanon and Walker Bow. They've been in my head ever since the beginning. And it's funny because Alanon is the first one, but Voyage has Walker Bow as the druid. So I was actually introduced to Walker Bow before I was introduced to Al-Anon. But the character that gave me the biggest, like, throwing me back in time was Balinor. When Balinor appeared and he said who he was, it was literally taking me back. Like, I felt it. Like, I'm like, oh man, I love this character. He's like, I think my favorite one in this book. And yeah. So, like, the cast, the Elmsfords, Shay and Flick, Al-Anon, Minion Lee, Panamon Creel, Keltset, Hendel, Dern and Dale, Eventine. Like, there's just so many good characters in this book, and I was just like, man, this is good. Like, I was thinking to myself, is it as good as I remember it being? You know, that kind of thing. And a few chapters in, I was like, already like, yeah, I'm feeling it. And the thing is, I don't have the extended crazy amounts of free time because I work in the middle of the day, which makes it very hard to try to do something time consuming. Because it means if you do it, by the time you're done, it's like, okay, I gotta get ready for work. And at night, it's like, well, it's night. And it's like, I get home at like 10:30. And so it's like, I want to use the last of this night to do something. Before, when I would get home from school at like 2, that gave me plenty of time. I could bust out a book and read like 20 chapters and be satisfied, you know? I can't do that now. So I've counteracted it by reading whenever I can and whenever I feel like it. And then listening to the audiobook. Which this one, for Sword, is on Spotify. But Spotify only has the annotated version, which has Terry Brooks break in every so often with like little factoids about the story, which are neat to hear. But I would have preferred just a story. And it actually helps a lot. Like, I've actually found myself able to pay attention to that, which I was worried of how it would go. Because, like, at work, usually by like 8, definitely by 9, work slows down enough that we're left to our own devices to do. Like, we're not assigned specific tasks at that point. And it's like, go to specific, like, there's specific areas that we all kind of have that we clean and we can do by myself. And I don't need to like talk to my supervisor or anything about that. So I go over there and I listen to the audiobook while I'm doing my work. And I could do that for like an hour or so almost every day, depending on how busy we are. And it's helped a lot. It's really good. Just like I'm doing all my doing everything I do and listening to a really good story at the same time. There's actually quite a few chapters that I actually listened to twice and read. I actually finished the book by reading the last few chapters because I wanted to read the ending just like how I read the beginning. And it's really good. And I was really disappointed because all the other books on Spotify, you have to like buy them. Or at least Elfstone and Witchsong were like that. And I was like, man, how am I going to read the next one? But like a few days ago, I remembered that Amazon, I have Amazon Prime, and it's been telling me, yo, you have like a month free of Audible. It's been telling me that for years. And finally I used it. And it gives you 2 credits, and I used one to get the audiobook for Elfstones. So I read Elfstones at home every so often, and then I listen to it at work. I listened to 6 chapters yesterday. It was awesome. But back to Sword. Just talking about like how I read it. I think another really cool thing about Sword, and just in general reading these kinds of books, it gets me thinking, like, how do you start a story, you know? Because that's, like, really difficult. Like, figuring out an ending, I think, might come even easier. Like, you know where you want to go. But it always makes me think, how do you start? So reading Sword, I was like, how does it start? And literally the best way to put it, which is the accurate way, is it starts with a guy going home. Like it's late at night, he finished work, he's going home, and he's kind of like, ugh, I want to get home already. And that's the start. He bumps into a very important man on his way home, and that's how everything kicks off. The call to adventure in Sword is super quick. Like I was, not only was I surprised by it in terms of how fast it happened, but reading Elfstones now, I'm like, wow, this one's taking a lot longer to get onto the main quest. Because like Flick, I think it is the one who bumps into Al-Anon at the start of this book. And then they go to Shady Vale and he meets Shay. He tells him everything about the sword and the Four Lands and the Warlock Lord and the history of the War of the Races. And then he leaves, and then Balnor comes, and then he leaves, and then they have to run away from Shady Vale when the shadow, what are they called again? The Skull Bearers show up, and then they have to bail immediately. It's real quick how fast they get out of there and start their work getting to Callhaven, I think it is. It's kind of crazy, and it's like, man, they start off real quick. But yeah, I mean, the primary character you start with, Flick, Shay, and Menyon, really good. And I think what's really funny about reading this story is I realized I got like the names of a lot of stuff in here stuck with me for the rest of my life. Like the Lee family, because Menyon Lee is the first of the from the first like prince from Lee, character from Lee, member of the Lee family that we have in the books. This is the first one. I was just like how Flick and Shay are the first Olmsfords. And for some reason, the Lees are the ones that stuck with me the most. To the point that in my Fire Emblem fanfiction, there is a sword master who joins a team named Lee, and he is a reference and a nod to the Lees in the Shannara series. In a similar vein, a character I completely forgot about until he came in halfway through, because I remember the one cool thing about this book, and it reminds me a lot of when I watched Lord of the Rings for the first time. Because I heard a lot of people talking about how, what's their names? Frodo and Legolas, like, never talk. They share, like, maybe one. And I'm like, how? Throughout the whole trilogy. And it's because they just don't talk to each other for, like, the one half of a movie that they're hanging out together. Because then, everyone splits up at the end of the Fellowship, and they all go on different adventures. And it reminds me of how this book goes. Because that's exactly what happens after they, after they go through the mountains, through the, I forgot what the area was called, but the Tunnel of Kings or something like that. Some really, really spooky place that no one wanted to go, but they had to. Hall of Kings. Through the Hall of Kings. And I remember that sequence ends with the fight against like a big water serpent or like a big monster. And that's when Alanon reveals his druid fire for the first time, which is like the coolest thing ever. And then after that fight ends with them losing Shay, and then he goes off on his own quest for the rest of the book. He never reunites with anyone until the very ending. And then after everything that happens in Paranor, the rest of the group breaks up with Alanon, Flick, and Menyon heading off in one direction. And then Balnor, Hendel, Durn, and Dale in another. And then Alanon ends up sending Menyon to go tell Balnor's crew something else. And he gets sidetracked on his own adventure by himself. And it's really interesting. Like, I like it. The different perspectives that we take from how the group splits up and everything that they're doing, and how it all does culminate in the very important moments towards the end of the story and the climax. And it's fascinating to me how well that was handled in breaking everyone up and having them all contribute and continue these specific plot lines. Obviously, when Shay was by himself, I didn't think he would finish the story by himself, but I forgot who was with him. So when he met Panemon Creel and Keltset, I was like, I forgot about these characters. But how could I? Because Panemon Creel is another one that has influenced a lot of my stuff. I have like a comic series I drew. I don't remember if I talked about it on any of my videos. It's called The Elite Elements. And very far into the story, there is a family of geomancers that are introduced to that we meet. It's Teal, Noyle, and Orchard. And their family name is Panemon. So it's Panemon Teal, Panemon Orchard, and Panemon Noyle. And so meeting Panemon Creel, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot that. I've so long since forgotten that the Panemons in my story were another callback to Shannara and Panemon Creel. What's funny about that is, though, that Panemon Creel's not a geomancer. If he was to like hold his hand out and shoot anything, it would be fire, just because he's dressed in all red. And his personality, if anything, I don't think any of my Panemons are anywhere close to him. Noyle is the closest one, but even then, is very clearly different. So it's just funny that I named these three characters. I just really like the name Panemon, and I just assigned it to the Geomancers, and I really liked it. But yeah, that was fun. But him popping up unexpected, I'm wondering what I'm thinking about, because there's a scene in the book when Patamon Creel and Keltsit have to fight a Skullbearer, and it's kicking their asses. Or at least it's really kicking Panamon's ass. Keltsit's kind of going 1-for-1 with it, and the whole time Shay is trying to get his elf stones back from Patamon. Oh man, that's a lot of no context there. Um, but they're these like magic rocks basically that a descendant, I think it has to be a descendant of Gerald Shannara who used them. I forget if there was a specific like bloodline tied to it, but the Elmsfords, or at least people descendant from Shay, definitely do use it in future books, and they can be used for a multitude of things. Like the first time the stones are ever used in the book is to help Shay, Flick, and Minion find their way out of fog that they're lost in. It lights a path. And he knows it can be used against evil creatures, I think because Al-Anon tells him that. And Patamon refuses, like the whole fight, he's getting his ass kicked, he refuses to give the stones because he doesn't think they're anything like magical per se. He just thinks they're like stones that he could probably sell for a lot of money because they're like precious metals or precious whatever, minerals. And he doesn't want to give them back. He's like, no, it's my money. And he's getting his ass kicked, and finally he's like, okay, here, take them, because he's like getting his ass kicked. And then Shay's able to use it and almost take out the Skullbearer, and then Keltsit finishes it off. But like, it makes me think, I swear there's another book or another situation I've read to where a character gets into that situation, but the people get out of it so he doesn't get his stones back in the end. I was like, is that this book? Clearly not. I'm just thinking about where else that could happen. Something like that. The fact that it would happen again is weird, but gosh, I'm all over the place. I don't even know how I'm covering. I don't even think I'm covering this well, but that's okay. I think the only people who should watch these are people who've read the books before, because if you haven't, it's not going to help you. It's not like this is a review or an introduction to the book. It's just me deciding to talk about how much I like the book in a very nonsense way. But like, it's a very like simple story ultimately, which is just Shay needs to find, or the whole group needs to find the Sword of Shannara so that Shay can use it to defeat the Warlock Lord and bring peace to the Four Lands. Because the Warlock Lord is amassing an army that's going to sweep over the entire world and take everything over, and just evil reigns. You know, very simple. Very simple story, and yet it's like that's all it needs to be. You know, stories don't need to be super overly complicated. The lore and like the setup for the world of Shannara. That was the other thing I didn't like about reading the book or listening to the audiobook. It's just like hearing the guy pronounce all the words. I've always called it the Sword of oh man. The Sword of Shannara? I think that's what I've called it, Shannara. But in the books, they pronounce it, in the audiobooks, they pronounce it Shannara. I think that's it. And I'm like, I don't like that, so I'm gonna not say it that way. It's Shannara. Even if I think even Terry Brooks, during his like author's notes in the middle, would say Shannara, and I'm just like, not doing it. I respect you, Terry Brooks, I really do. You wrote some awesome as fuck stories, and I love them. But I hate Shannara, so I'm not gonna say it. This is good, man. I'm trying to think of like what's the best way to keep talking about the story, and it's like it's really hard. Because a lot of moments from this book still, like, I remembered, like the Hall of Kings, that entire sequence, the last fight, and Shay splitting off from the group. I remember that vividly, and the Druid Fire is one of the coolest things I think about the story. It's just the Druid's main method of attack. It's shooting blue fire from their fingertips, which is awesome. Al-Anon can do it. Walker Bow can do it. I think it's fair to say Grianne could probably do it too. Maybe? I actually don't know. I'll need to know when I get to High Druid to see if she can do that. But and it's an evolution of the night, the Word in the Void, which is another trilogy that's like set way in the past of these stories. From or I guess like the druids' predecessors, but theirs is white fire that comes from a staff, which is still super awesome. At least I think it's white, or was it blue too? It's been a long time since I read those. I have only one over there, but that's for another time whenever I get to that trilogy. Jeez. Yeah, it's what was really funny is that there was a time when I was only listening to the audiobooks. I hadn't opened this in a while, and Durin and Dale had been in the group for a while, which are the Elven brothers. It's Durin, D-U-R-A-N, and Dale. And every time I heard Dale's name, I just, in my head, imagined it spelled D-A-L-E, like Dale. But it's Dale, with a Y in the middle. And I was like, since when? This doesn't sound like that when the guy's reading it out. In the first war of the races. Yes, I know. Gnomes. I like how they always describe gnomes as being yellow-skinned. Like, I can't imagine what that looks like. It sounds really sickly. But, there's a lot of stuff about, like, let me think. One thing I remember about the book, too, or that I misremembered about this series, is Terry Brooks does a great job when it comes to creating his characters, and when it comes to killing them. Like, he loves to. He does that a lot throughout the series. There's a lot of character deaths that really bother me, and I feel really bummed out by. And it starts with Elfstones, which is the second book in the series. But there's others that just I was very unhappy with, whether it was during the events of the Voyage in total. Like during the Voyage, there's a bunch of character deaths I was not happy about. I think High Druid has some too. I know. I forgot what it was called. But the one with Bearers of the Black Staff had one that surprised me. And it's just... What's funny is that I was like thinking about it. I remember Elfstones a lot. Oh, and First King too. Killed like my favorite character, which really upset me. But with Sword, I couldn't remember anyone who died. And I was like, man, I think for his first book, he didn't do anything like that. He let everyone survive the adventure. Which is nice. I don't think that's a bad thing. Not true though. That's absolutely not true. The series ends. The book ends with 2 named characters dying, and I was like, what? I had forgotten that. That of the main crew that comes together in Cullhaven, it's actually Hendel, the dwarf, that dies at the end of the book. Which I was surprised by when I was listening to the audiobook and that happened. I was like, wait, Hendel dies? Since when? And then at the very end, after the Warlock Lord is defeated, Keltset dies during the cave-in, and I was like, what? That one too? I legitimately didn't know that. It'd been so long, and I'm like so familiar with a bunch of other character deaths from future books that I just blanked these out of my mind, and I really thought that no one died in this one. I think something interesting about Sword is, I guess, Sword kind of does it. Other stories do it. And I don't really have an issue with it. The villains in a lot of the Shannara books are generally like forces of evil and like almost like demonic undead creatures or something like that. So it's like the Warlock Lord in this one, or Dagnamor and the demons in the next one. Morgour and Voyage. Like they're usually some kind of weird spirit or demon creature. The handsome boy in the Bearers of the Black Staff and the sequel book, which I forgot what that one was called. But the interesting thing about these demons and these villains that I like is how they don't really have a lot going for them. I know that sounds weird. They don't really get a lot of development, and I don't really think that's even really a problem. But it's just the way that a lot of them are handled. Like, it sticks to my mind because of how, like, disconnected they are. Because a lot of them operate on their own for most of the story, and the first time they encounter the main heroes is also the last time, because then they die. And in some stories, the identity of the villain is not really known to the heroes, so they fight and kill it without really knowing who it was. If that makes any sense. This would be more relevant to talk about in a future book. But it's just something that I always thought was interesting. And like the Warlock Lord, when he finally comes face to face with Shay, Panemon Creel, and Celtic at the end of the book, he's around for like that chapter, and he talks to them like a handful of times before he's killed. But I don't think that's really so much of a problem. That like when I first read the book, I was expecting like a big final showdown, but I didn't get that. And reading it now, I knew that that's not what would happen. There wouldn't be some big sword fight or dramatic magic fight. It's the idea of it that's more interesting. It's just the fact that the Sword of Shannara's ultimate power is to reveal truth, and just the way that Shay, the Warlock Lord, and forgot the little dwarf's name, the one that has the sword. Oral Thane, found it right at the start of chapter 30. They mention him. Yeah, the way that the three of them interact with the Sword of Shannara is like, it's just really cool. I really like it, the way that it like that power of truth and how useful it actually is in specific situations, to be fair. But I liked it. I really did. And I know that the sword will only become relevant and be used in one other book, and I just don't remember which book it is. But I do remember, well, technically two, because I believe it's also a big part of the first King of Shannara. But I know there's another book somewhere down the line where they bring it back because its power of truth will actually be useful. But generally, it's mainly used just in this one and in First King. But this is really cool. Like, I don't know, like, how else to how to set this up, this video. I've just been blabbing for almost half an hour about the most random topics. I don't know if I've even gone in depth into the book as much as I probably should have, but it's just something to have something that you really enjoy. So like, obviously diving into Bangrim on the anime side, now Shannara on the book side. The only purpose isn't, I don't set this up with the idea of reviewing, because I don't think I'm good at reviewing anything. I don't think, that's why I called my review series that I used to do a long time ago non-reviews. Because I don't really think I have the capability in me to properly review something and quantify it in like a way that I guess makes sense. So I'm like, it's more like I'm talking about this thing and what I feel about it. And so that's kind of like, this is like the next evolution in that. It's just an excuse to talk and blab and be happy about something I really like Bangrim and like Shannara. Yeah, I think also that there's times when the book can be funny, and I think it's important that there is levity and there's epic stuff, like the final battle. Because one thing that they're building up to is the fact that the Northern Army, the Warlock Lord's Northern Army, is going to sweep through the Southland, take everything over, and then it'll be easy enough to destroy the Westland and the Eastland. On its way to the Southland, it will be stopped at Cullhaven, or at Tircis, and the Border Legion there is like legendary. They hold the line, and they've never been defeated. And it's building up to the idea that a war will come and a fight will be fought at Tircis. And it finally happens in the last, I think, 3 chapters of the book, 4 chapters, or at least that's how long the fight is. And it's amazing. Like, it's really well written, and it's like so engaging. It was pretty amusing though that Balnor had a bunch of red shirts introduced beforehand. Like all the other commanders of the Border Legion, all these random names that are dropped, like Fandwick, just show up there to be his commanders of the different branches of the army, and then they die. I think by the end of the war, only 2 of them are still alive. One is severely wounded, and the other one, I don't even know if he got into the fight because he was commanding the troops inside the city, and the monsters, the not monsters, it was the trolls and the dwarves did not get into the city until almost the end of the fight. So I don't know if they actually fought him, which was the guy with one of my favorite names from how it was pronounced. I like the name Fandwick. Like, there were like 5 different commanders, and Fandwick is one of the only ones I remember just because I like his name. But Jonas Sempre is the other one. Such a fucking awesome name. for a character that does almost nothing. Like, he's in the story for a very small amount of time, but he's got a great name. So, you know, I respect that. Great name. Just Cheryl Ravenlock was another character I completely forgot about, because she's introduced super late, and she's part of Manion's whole storyline with him going to, I forgot what it was called. See if it's actually on the ship. It should still be on the map. The one Southland city that she's from. It's like an island. Kern. There we go. I think that's it. It's not Varfleet, right? No, that's a different one. There's the Valley of Ren. Strelaheim, the Rab. I think that's it. So you can see the map here. Ooh, it's so cool. Yeah, I like how the praise on the back of this book is nothing to do with Sword. These are like little compliments for Voyage, the first book of Voyage, Ill Switch. Oh, and the second, Anthrax. Let's see if I got that right. I could, you know, I'm always like, I'm trying to draw blanks, and I have like the answers in here because it actually has the list of books in the opening. I forgot I was gonna look at it again, and I didn't because I'm incompetent. Here we go. Yeah, the Sword of Shannara Trilogy is now included with, like, First King is included with it, and it's just called Shannara. So it's the top left. I probably can't read it, but that's all it says. Yeah, there's Heritage, Voyage, High Druid, Dark Legacy, Defenders, Fall, Genesis, Legends, and then there's other books that are not related. I see Word in the Void over there, which is good. So, like, me, I know that I've read Shannara, Heritage, Voyage, and High Druid. I don't think I read Dark Legacy. I don't think I did. I definitely didn't read Defenders, and I definitely didn't read Fall. And then pre-Shannara, I know I read Genesis and Legends. So I read all those, and Word in the Void. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books in the series I have not read. But before I get to them, I gotta read like a dozen other ones. I think the smart thing to do is to go release order. Because I don't think I'll be jumping around that much though, because I think at some point he just started writing everything in the chronological order. But in the beginning it jumped around a bit. And I'm fine with that. Oh yeah, the battle scenes though, man. Just whenever they roll around, I'm so excited for Elfstones. I want to talk about Elfstones, but I know I can't because I just started reading it. But I vividly remember it's such a funny book. Like not funny, but like, because it has two main plots. One plot is let's go take this seed and find fertilizer, essentially like summing it up. And the other plot, the B plot, is giant demon battle for the existence of elves in this world. So it's just funny switching between those two different events that are happening. But Sword's great. It's such a solid start, and it just grabs, and I'm in it. It's funny how quickly I was immediately just so invested again in rereading it, and how much I'm looking forward to rereading everything else. Like, I'm very excited to get through the whole series again. Really looking forward to what all the rest of the stories are going to be about. It's been a long time coming. Yeah, so that'll probably be a big thing that I'll definitely advance on next year, since probably by the end of this year, maybe I can finish Elfstones before the year ends, but I definitely don't think I'll be able to finish Wish Song. We'll see. Anyway, that was my very scattered thoughts on the Sword of Shannara. I'll try to plan out my next one to be a bit more solid, to like follow like a through line in discussion instead of just bouncing all over the place like a maniac. But maybe that's the fun of it. It's just that it is no script, no order. It's just me talking about something that I very much love. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully there's people out there who really like Shannara who won't mind talking about it too. Anyway, That's all I got for now. So until next time, hasta.